Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome to episode 79 of the Madaxeman podcast. This is the one that comes in the week that has been Christmas for ancient wargamers all around the world, or possibly depending on how efficient their postal service is, as ADLG version 4 has been hitting the doorsteps and has been furiously flicked through and thumbed through by everybody, all and sundry, and that includes all 7 of us on the Madaxeman podcast. So this episode, whilst we do have a normal run round of painting, is mostly devoted to going through the list of changes for ADLG version 4 as they've been published both on the official site and on the Madaxeman website. So have a look at that, sit back, pull back your ear holes and get ready for the podcast.
This means war.
Well, welcome. We're, it's like about 130, something like that. We just do one. Now we're on one a fortnight. We've just lost the ability to control time, but we've also lost the ability to control video on Andy. But he's here in audio on the Galaxy A41.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
And the rest of the team are also here. We've got a full suite of 7 in this, our first post everybody getting their sweaty little paws on ADLG version 4, the hard copy book. People waving it. People are waving it at the screen. It's just like Facebook, isn't it? Everyone's proving they've got it here. That's amazing.
It's even arrived in the States, I'm told.
It's even arrived in the States. It's arrived in Finland. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's omnipresent. As Alexei Sale used to say in the late 80s, it's 5 Sikhs in a broken down Datsun. Because wherever you go, they're omnipresent. There's always that by the side of a motorway, but there are no Datsuns anymore. That's moved on. But let's move straight on and dive in. What this week we're going to do, we're going to have a chat about ADLG 4. Fairly obviously, that's going to be the meat of this one. But we are still keeping with the same regular features. So to kick things off, a rattle round the painting world. And I think, Adam, let's start with you, because I can see you're painting a Perry as we speak. In fact, it looks like you're dry brushing a Perry. So you'll have the whole army done by the end of the podcast.
Well, as I say, the metal bits maybe, but the colourful bits are going to take a while because they need to be built up. But I've had, I started the first week was quite successful, and then I thought I can't be asked to do any painting. That and the cricket season started. But do you know, I was talking about me 10mm Germans going, they just don't look German because they're grey greens to grey green. Yeah, great. We had a trouser discussion, didn't we, last 2 weeks ago? I'm actually quick because I remember saying at the time, perhaps it's only because they've only got that colour on at the moment, and then I was going to do a wash over them. And I'm pleased to say, after breaking up the whole grain greenness of it with sort of like a sand-coloured bread bag and rifle and stuff, and then putting on a wash, it really has toned it down. So now they look good. Actually, I'm pleased with them. They won't win any awards for painting, but for standing in front of my horde of T-34s looking scared before they get run over, they're working really well. So pleased with that. Then I got together 3 more of the ships, the ironclad ships, because painting them so the masts stay up straight is a pain. That's done. And I did that about a week ago. And now, because it's a British summer, I'm just patiently waiting for a window where I can take them outside and spray paint them, undercoat them. So that's waiting, and now I'm just sort of like starting on these Perry chaps. So good week or good 2 weeks.
Been kind of predictive. Oh, good. Dave, you're licking a brush as we speak as well. I don't know whether you're doing painting or whether it's just a force of habit, just to give us the impression, because your hands are below the video screen, which is probably the safest place. Oh, no, they're here. That's good. And that looks like a man on a horse of some sort with a little hat on.
It's a
feudal man on a horse.
Armenian cavalry who are doubling up as Hinets.
Hinets. Is this some more of your European pronunciation?
Yeah, exactly. So I realised that I only had 2 Hinets done for my medieval Spanish army, so I've knocked off another 2 more, so I've now got 4 if I need them in the case. So and guess what? There's a load of Franks back on the table.
Oh, they're back. There's still more Franks being done. You've decided to finish off that 2nd or 3rd army.
Yeah, there's about, I don't know, there's just too many to count. It's a bit silly, to be quite honest.
So was this a delve into your bit straw then, so to speak?
Yes, because I'm definitely ready for another project, and now hopefully I'm going to have the money to get them. So it's waiting for. Hello, Mr. Kurasan. Please get your Assyrians together and put them on your website so we can all buy them off you.
Right. Yeah. Let's see that man John Katz. Does he listen to this podcast? That's the question.
That's the question. Yeah.
Or I guess you could wait for the museum to redo their Assyrians, because they seem to be redoing all the really nice ranges with even nicer brand new sort of Z range troops. Yeah. So I think the Mycenaeans are coming out soon, aren't they, as well?
Mycenaean might be tempting. Yeah, that's an idea.
Might be. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Peter, were you? Well, obviously, I think we're discussing in my week in a bin shed. Which is a different story that we'll come to. I think you've put your hand up for some slightly faded Mycenaeans potentially, which might short circuit you for that rather somewhat bland army. But
yeah, I just thought why not put my hand up for that. I've got because I thought they're not going to be a fantastic army, but I'll try them out for a bit of fun. For painting, I've actually enjoyed a bit of the nice weather and actually got out, sat in the garden and managed to do some Arabs. So I was digging through,
what scale were they? 15s or 28s?
15s, 15 mil. I just realized I was digging through what I'd got as almost inventory while I was waiting for the book, and realized I got a load of Arab figures, and we'll go on in the book in a minute. But yeah, there's lots more options, so lots more things to play with. So I'm using the contrast colors. They usually, get nice and bright. I like
which manufacturer are these from?
These are Forged in Battle from the Kickstarter.
Okay, yeah.
So as are most of my Arabs. Well, I've got some which are Donington and some which are Forged in Battle. Or were they all Donington? No, some were Forged in Battle.
Okay.
The latest Kickstarter. So yeah, I'm quite pleased about it.
Okay, so you managed to remember you bought an army about 2 years ago, and then it got delivered a year ago, and then you've remembered you had it.
No, it was I got it and I painted up a whole host of it, but then I played the Arab armies, but they weren't that great as it was in that period because they just get stomped by some of the knights. But I'll come to it in a minute when we start talking about V4. Okay. But there's a bit more of a separation now.
Okay, interesting. And Tamsin, what about you? What's been because 2.5 weeks since we last were on this Zoom call, you must have painted, 1,000 things, but some of them incredibly well.
No, because
probably an airborne division.
Thousands of things. I started work on the hills.
It's been terrain, so it's skips.
It's been terrain. Started work on some hills. Got the shapes cut out of XPS. Then I realised
of what? XPS.
XPS, extruded polystyrene. So blue foam.
What? Blue foam. Okay, all right. I've heard of this miraculous stuff, but I've never quite gone there myself. But yeah.
Realised that I was going to need to put them onto bases, and I didn't have anything that was large enough, so decided I needed to get some A3 mount board. So that had to wait. While I was waiting to get out to Central London for shops to get that. Decided, what the hell? I'll paint up some 20mm containers and skips.
As you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they look very, very old, very dirty, and that's a compliment.
Yeah.
Which is grand. Who makes these?
When I was out doing shopping, went to 4D Model Shop, seen a newsletter, a product called Karamastone.
Okay.
Which is an air drying clay with, I think it's sand or very fine grit in it, so that ends up when it's dry, it's got a texture a bit like pumice stone.
Okay.
And also brought some woodland scenic rock molds and did some took some casts with the Karamastone.
So you've made some stones, is that right?
Yes.
And you cast these or something like that?
Yeah.
Right. I'm not going out. I'm not criticizing because they look fabulous. But
you're not casting the first stone, are you?
Oh, dear.
You see, Andy's not on, so we need someone to
Yeah, that was good. That was good. It was like the ghostly voice of Andy from his Galaxy A41. It's come in on the long wave radio and done it. So these are the hills underway then as well.
These are the hills underway. So have been glued onto the boards, painted the underside of the boards, and they sort of use sort of brown acrylic frame sealant to go around for either bottoms of the hills on the bases, and also used it to glue. I'd stick on the rocks on a few of them.
These are the rocks you made, stuck onto hills you made.
Guys, can I just ask, am I the only one thinking when Tamsin said I've made some stones? I'm thinking
why didn't I just go out and find some stones?
Yeah, because I thought when you put that up on screen, I thought you were going to say, I went to a pet shop and they had a big fish section and I picked these up for a couple of quid. But no. But are they better for being made? Are they a specific size that fits with the game?
They're quite
stony,
thin. So only a couple of millimeters thick.
So
you can just put them onto the surface of.
So they're floor stones.
You see, some other people just use thin stones.
Yes,
but where's the art in that, Peter? Where's the art?
You wouldn't get the same sort of texture
on a real
stone.
Known
as a stone chip,
a big chip. Okay, so there's a lot of hills.
About
a lot of hills underway.
Half of these will be sort of desert, wasteland type hills. The other half will be done sort of grassy, temperate.
But how do you get the miniatures to actually stay on those? Because they seem sort of like quite steep.
Some of them are a bit steep, but most of them aren't that steep.
Yeah.
And a couple of bits. Some of them, sort of the steeper ones, will be primarily for sort of skirmish games, and I've sort of carved in flat areas higher up at various heights that they can go on. So
So stones, and these will be for your jungle people then, wherever it is.
Some of them will be for jungle people. Some of them will be for sort of desert wasteland, as I said. So mostly sort of strontium dog type games.
Okay, all right. So has that been your 2 weeks, or have there been any little people?
That's been my 2 weeks.
Okay.
This means war.
But in terms of industrial wasteland, I've spent chunks of the last 2 weeks in 2 bin sheds in Tooting, trying to help sort out some of one of our former club members, our late former club members' collection, which has been a real reminder to me to sort out my own stuff, because the amount that people can actually collect is really quite frightening. So I've been sorting through a lot of that, but in between I've managed to fit in some painting. I've done, again, those Legio Heroica Ottomans that me and Dave picked up in a joint order. I picked them up before Christmas in a joint order, just before the Brexit hammer came down on any sort of international shipping of toy soldiers stuff across Europe. And but it's been good. They're really nice figures. They do look, I was worried they wouldn't look different enough to the Arabs I've got from Legio Heroica, because they're in very similar poses, but those Ottoman hats with the turban and the red bit in the middle are just so distinctive, and they're really, really nice little figures. And I've actually got some fire and sword generals to go with them, but I'm just not sure I'll use them because they look so odd and so different, and the horses look really kind of gangly and lanky, and they just don't really fit together at all. So I might try and do something completely different with that. I've nearly finished these little 10mm things from I think it's Apocalypse Games, that there's this new Kickstarter thing that I've worked out what to do with them, which is to base them up on little 15mm rounds, so I can use them as counters for a game. So tiny little knights on a round or whatever, because there's not enough, and I don't I can't see myself going for that. Get a 10mm army and base it for a bigger scale thing. I'm just not quite there on that one. I've got enough 15s to do, but there's a few board games that I'm going to use them for. So I might even pick up a few more and some possibly some Arabs as well to fight against them on some of these board games, which is kind of fun. And then I also fell for a kind of Wargamers Twitter terrain meme thing. So I'm trying to think which of the two shops is it? I think it's Dunelm. Yes, Dunelm, which people who live not in central London will probably know very well. A big, not quite DIY, but sort of homewares and stuff. And there was a thing a while ago about this bath mat that they do. I
think you mentioned it on last podcast.
Yeah, and so I got the bath mat, and because I was cycling up the A40, and I got the bath mat, and I started cutting it out to cut it into irregular shapes, and I've discovered that doesn't bloody work, and I'm starting to suspect, because as soon as you start to cut it, it just all unravels, really, and all these trees just disappear into kind of string. But now I think about it, all the excitement on it on Twitter of people going, I've worked this out, this is going to be cool, I'm going to do this. And I'm thinking, I never heard from those people again about the success of this project. It was just a great idea. Look what I've done. This will be great. Yet it was never heard of again. And I'm starting to see why, because it doesn't really bloody work.
So you're basically saying you get sucked in by fads?
Of course I get sucked in by fads.
I suspect that Dunelm has got some War Games influences.
I think it has. I think it probably has.
They have these special people go on social media trying to sell.
Just influence the War Games to buy these £12.99 bath mats with like really big green bobbles on for 6mm wargaming. And
they probably thought, how are we going to shift these?
Exactly.
Who's going to get there?
Exactly. And I'm still trying to work
outside
out,
the box.
have I got a really big, could I put it in a really useful box and put like a layer of water diluted with PVA, or PVA diluted with water in the bottom, and then sit the mat in it such that the PVA water would soak up into the sort of the base layer of the mat, so when that dried, I would then be able to cut it without it unraveling all.
What was the reason for getting this mat again?
About 12 quid. So
what was the reason?
It looks very much like a forest for 6mm modern tanks. It's amazing. I must be able to get it. Hang about. It's got to be somewhere. Talk amongst yourselves.
Don't tell him that it was all of us that were actually on the site trying to mug him into buying it.
Look at that.
Yeah, it was one of my sock puppets. Oh wow, Tim, they'll look at that in your bathroom.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really good. You know what? That looks like a 6mm forest.
It looks exactly like a 6mm forest, doesn't it? And they're like trees.
A very big 6mm forest.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But the only problem is it's a perfect 6mm forest as long as you want the forest on your battlefield that's about 20 inches by about 28, rectangular, purely rectangular. But if you start to cut it and cut like little bits out of it, it just all frays away and it doesn't really...
So why don't you just burn the edges?
Because burning, the whole thing might catch fire.
Because it's wood.
It'd be a forest fire. It'd be awful.
Yeah.
So there's definitely something about water and PVA and binding it together and stuff. It's going to be like a 2-year project.
What you're saying is, by the time you finish, you could have actually bought individual trees, really expensive ones.
Yeah, the knock or the fallow ones, absolutely. It's going to be a lot cheaper. My life would be much more enriched through having other things to do. But the sense of satisfaction about beating this bloody thing and being the first ever person on Wargames Twitter to go, I did buy one and I have actually managed to deploy it. Because I don't think anyone else has ever actually managed to do that, because you just cut through and it just all bloody unravels. But look, bloody green stuff here, it just fell apart even when I was waving at it.
It's unraveling just like your sensibility right now.
Yes, I'm unraveling. The mat's unraveling. It's just all consistent.
I think there must be a buyer's a manual in all sorts of fabric shops that say anything you buy must have a byproduct used for wargamers.
Yes.
And don't stock it if it doesn't.
No, well, I'm not going anywhere near Dunelm anymore. Although I have heard that. What's the other one? The other one is The Range, and apparently they stock Winsor and Newton professional matte varnish.
Yeah, they do.
So
The
Range is another shop that's in the suburbs.
One at Surrey Quays.
There we go, in the suburbs.
Yeah. Before we discovered Rafa's mats, Aldi were selling sort of mats for $6.99 that you could make battle mats out of. but I think they're quite heavy and chunky, and I think
I think Ian Mackay bought some for the club.
Yeah,
and they were useless because basically you rolled them up and they stayed rolled up.
Yeah, they
never flattened again.
Cylinders, and when you try to put them down, you need heavy lead.
You needed a 28mm figure on each corner.
Yeah,
or a whole base of 28mm figures on each corner to actually make the damn thing sit down once you'd rolled them up once. And the idea of storing them flat just defeats the bloody object. So they didn't work at all.
Tim, you're missing a trick here. Maybe you can sell some of Clive's larger figures as paperweights, decorative paperweight.
I don't want to go there in terms of talking about some of those larger figures. There's some kind of interesting ones. But yeah, so that's been my mix of painting and no, it's not haberdashery, is it? Interior decor and things like that, and then ferreting through stuff in bin sheds as well. So it's been very eclectic. But right, let's keep going around. Simon, you're painting as we speak as well.
Yeah, so I managed to, over the last couple of weeks, actually finish something. So I had this random geezer show up on a cycle, I think it was, or a car.
I think it was a car, wasn't it?
Yeah, drop off a bunch of half-painted random Scots. So,
yes, the half-painted Scots army.
Yeah, so I've now got 6 bases of Scots painted up for Renaissance and a general unit painted. So I tried doing kilts and trying to do the tartan. So above my painting skill, it looked absolutely diabolical. So
above the pay grade.
Yeah.
Go to that Yoji.
Probably buy something done out.
So what was it? Because that was a half-done painting project that I'd sort of done undercoat and a couple of basic colours, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So was it kind of weird picking up someone else, getting your head around what the process was with picking up someone else's painting project?
Yeah, it was quite weird because when I picked up the figures, you had a few guys who had white socks, a little bit of flesh, a bit of undercoat, a few green tartan kilts and all that. So you're sort of sitting there going, do I strip them all down and just start over again, or bugger it, you've done the base coat already.
Yeah.
And at least the base coat was good enough you could build up from it. So I went for that option and just use that as the base coat. And they look very Scottish.
I saw the pictures. They've got some red heather and stuff as well.
Yeah, so they'll definitely become medium swordsmen, most likely impetuous of some type, with probably either bagpipe polearm or polearm bagpipes.
Yes, the new polearms, which we shall come on to later. Okay, all right. And Andy, what about you? And to kind of wrap us up on the painting section.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Well, I've been carrying on painting these 10mm World War II stuff, and I've now got a total of 32 bases of Paras painted up, which is an entire army for O Group, and including some Paras which have even got red berets.
Yes, you've been listening to the podcast, episode number 64 or something, I believe.
Oh,
good.
Probably long before that, but
probably long before that.
So, and I even managed to make 5 kind of workable Hano mags out of that disastrous kit thing. So, so that's reasonably respectable. In hindsight, I would have stuck them together a bit more carefully and in a different order. But hey, a 10mm on, the 3-foot rule, they look like Hano mags with German guys in them, and that's good enough for me.
So basically, you're saying it was user error. Is that the conclusion?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it was down to me. I mean, it would have been helpful if the instructions had been completely idiot-proof, but that was, they couldn't expect somebody at my muppetry to be doing this kind of job. So, I can't really blame.
Well, I suppose if they are going in there with the 48-step painting process, they're assuming a fairly high level of proficiency at assembling the 5-part model kit, aren't they? Really?
Well, I mean, sort of 5 less bits on painting and 5 more bits of put these together in this order. I personally would have found a bit more helpful.
Yeah, no, that might have been the secret. Okay, so you've not done any ancient stuff at all then?
No, I'm just basically doing some basing and tidying up. I've reconfigured some of the Indians I bought from Simon and basically converting some medium foot into light foot by just taking one figure off the middle. So I should probably buy a few more Indians. But I should probably wait till next year when museum do their sale and I can buy the guys I want.
Wow. All right, amazing. So we know, but I guess that does drift us towards thinking about future armies and drift us towards the next stage of the podcast, which is when we're going to dive into the brand new loveliness that is ADLG version 4.
This means war.
Well, look, here we are talking about ADLG version 4, which we've now all got, and Hervé has very handily produced a guide to the key changes, which is probably the structure that it's easiest to go through it, because then other people can sort of follow it as well. So just starting with Hervé's document and seeing what people think. The first thing is light infantry get a few little changes. They're no longer destroyed if they're contacted by a pursuit, but they can evade from a pursuit. They've now got a ZOC against everybody they can contact, which means in the real world, light infantry now ZOC elephants, which is the important one. And there's a new type of sort of slightly crap firearm, I guess, which is flamethrowers, Nafferton, hand grenadiers.
What's not to love with that?
I'd love that. It's got to be brilliant, hasn't it? It's
I love
a slightly crap fire.
Yeah, flamethrowers. You have to love that.
You've got to have the flames. Relight my fire. Yeah, baby.
You've got to have it.
It's got to burn.
Dave, you're painting some as we speak.
Yes.
Yeah. But I guess the big one, though, is light infantry has a zone of control against elephants in particular. And actually light horse as well, to be fair, which is important. So that's what do we think about that one? Is anybody?
Well, the bit you're missing as well is the initiative piece as well. So they actually
yes,
which
they
is
count for initiative,
and that's going to be a big changer.
Yeah, that's important. So how do we think that this might change the game?
I think it'll be quite enjoyable because I think, I'm a big medieval fan. So, as always, people know I like my heavy metal, those later armies. And a lot of those don't get much in the way of light horse. But being able to use light foot to give me that initiative will actually mean some of my armies have say more than initiative of either 0 or 1. So I'm looking forward to that part.
Yeah, I wondered if it would mean
Simon, because you need shed loads of light infantry to make a difference in the initiative score.
I'd be happy for an initiative of 1 in some of my army. So
Oh, fair enough. All right.
I wonder if what it will mean is that there will be more armies getting up to an initiative of the +2 from the light horse. So instead of just saying I'm just taking 2 light horse, you might say I'm taking 4 and 6 light infantry. So I think it will lead to a few more light horse, which will, mean less troops in the middle. So that will kind of balance things out a bit. I can see the light horse and the flanks being a bit more important in the game, and for other reasons as well. But and also defanging elephants a little bit with a ZOC. You're going to screen them most times anyway, aren't you? I suppose, but being able to ZOC other people, I suppose you can whiz around the back and kind of get hold of them.
That's going to be a big one. I mean, the thing about the elephants is the big deal because you're going to have an elephant. If elephants will scream with light foot, there's going to be a serious light foot fight before the elephants get anywhere. So it slows the elephants down, if anything.
Yeah, I suppose it stops elephants marching around on their own, because light infantry can kind of pin them from behind. They have to be part of the battle line now. They can't do that kind of just roam around one elephant solo. Even more so than it used to.
Sure. You've got to love the Nafferton stuff, though. 0 protection against it,
Yeah.
Bit of flames. You can just imagine it. Simon's just rocking up with his heaviest of heavy metal. I just have a little bit of light infantry, and it's time to torch, baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was, I think, also from a modelling point, having the guys with flamethrowers would be great fun. There was back in Australia. There was one of the guys who was really good at making models, and he'd actually made, I think it was back in the day, it was called Siloy X, where it was Silo with Greek
fire.
It's like Greek fire. So he actually had Lightfoot throwing hand grenades, and then he had artillery, the pigs on fire. So he actually had a model of the catapult, with the pig on fire coming out of it. So I could see the more evil war gamers are just going to have fun with things on fire.
I think it's safe to say my painting and modelling abilities will not be going to that level.
Doing pigs on fire. No.
But on the plus side, it does justify bacon in wargaming competitions now.
Yep. Okay.
So, what was that? A bacon butty on a 40x40?
Yeah.
Yes, if it fits on a 40x40, it should be on a triangle. But going on to the changes for bowmen and crossbowmen, so they can now interpenetrate medium and heavy swordsmen and other bowmen and javelin men. They can now charge anybody. They don't. Before they weren't able to charge most battle troops really. Longbow get a bit cheaper. Most medieval crossbowmen now have the option for Pavis as well. There's a lot here. English archers and the Burgundian ordnance become medium swordsmen with longbows, so they can stand and fight a bit better. And then there's a handful of armies who have light medium infantry handgunners that are effectively crossbows that go bang. But I guess looking at this, I suppose the biggies are they can charge enemies, which is a thing, and longbows get cheaper, and some of them become a bit more combat ready. So does anybody use those sort of longbow armies, or anybody given a good old go with them in the past?
I'm tempted to actually do an English longbow army. I've actually got the figures, but I never did it in version 3 because the longbows were just so expensive. But now you can get your longbow to do medium sword as well. That makes I'm seriously thinking of looking at that as an option for a heavy metal medieval army.
I'm painting up French ordnance even as we speak, and that will have quite a few longbows in. And the fact that you can choose to contact, the fact that they've got swords, so they're going to be more effective in the rough and can actually fight in the rough, it just gives them more options, so it makes them more useful. So that's a good thing. Yeah. On the downside for me is they lose their eliteness, which is actually really annoying because elite longbows are just were really, really effective, and now they're a bit less effective, but they become more versatile. So, yeah, that's useful. I'll take that.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Adam. I think having the longbowmen lose their elite makes them less horrifying, but having them as swordsmen actually means they can pick a fight with something other than mounted.
But you can make some elite.
Not in the French ordnance. You can't.
I know, but 100 Years' War, English, you can bump them up to elite.
Yeah,
even with or without elite, I think the idea that you now have
longbow. So what they've done is for most of them, in a certain date range, they're longbowmen elite. Then at a certain point, they become medium swordsman longbow, with or without stakes.
So they're basically Janissaries with longbows. So, which is, I think, is great. It actually means, to me, makes sense. You've got a guy with a big bow, and when it gets down to close and intimate, he pulls out a rod and great big sword and goes, "I'll have you." Yeah, I think that'll be great fun. And also, my 25mm longbow finally come out of the cardboard box, so it's a win-win for me.
That's true. Yeah, they just needed to be cheaper, and in some ways, if they become less of them are able to be upgraded to elite, and elite becomes rarer, that makes the ordinary one being cheaper almost a double bonus. So you want to be fielding a lot of them. That's the right sort of field. And they were just too expensive. The right way to field those armies was to field 3 or 4.
Yeah,
which just didn't really cut it. I also like the Pavis thing, because Pavis is a really nice to paint and model.
Yeah,
and that there is no real reason.
Has anyone actually used Pavises?
Yeah. I think it's really good.
Times, especially in the later medievals. Especially in 25mm, you bought the Perry box of miniatures, and so you had to have the shields. So you bought them on the table. So it was quite nice when someone shoots you, go, "I've got Pavis, I've got Perfection 2" type of thing. So,
and even in game terms, when I did 100 Years French, there you can have some Gascon crossbows.
Yep.
You can give them a Pavis and make them elite. And people tend to think, longbows are just they'll take on anything. But it's elite crossbows with Pavis are just really, really funny. Even against foot knights, they're sort of being quite scary. So, it's quite a good deal. And
they can go and hunt down other bowmen, can't they? That's the thing, because they're...
even longbowmen, they're going, "Yeah, we'll have you."
Yeah, we'll have you. No, that's good. Medium swordsman. This is an interesting one. They drop a point, so become 6 points, even if impetuous, or 4 points in mediocre, which is kind of free, which makes warbandy armies cheaper once you start having large numbers of them, doesn't it? You get 10, 12 bases, you're getting another 2 in that, which is suddenly a lot.
I think this is going to make some of those, like my Gallic army. So I've got the Gallic, ancient British, Gallic, early German army. It's just going to be funny where you can drop down 15 or 20 elements of medium swordsmen and go, yeah, they're cheap as chips, but here you go. Deal with 20 of them. So I think it'll be really nice as a dross army. They're going to get decimated, but hopefully you'll have the volume, which is what you imagine these armies.
Yeah.
Can I just say on this, because after painting up those 25mm Dacians, I mean, it's for me, that's like a really good bonus, because all of a sudden all these bloody troops that I painted, my army gets bigger and better, and I was going to use it anyhow. Yeah. So that's a good deal. So I'll take it. Thank you very much. On the downside, I had to paint up hundreds of the bastards, and now I've got to find some more. Because I've got to do
more. You haven't got enough.
I've got 14 bases, which is the minimum. And it's like, if I want another couple of bases, so I'm going to spend it on some skirmishes or something.
Yeah.
So I'm not painting anymore. Yeah. So I'm just going to use it to make my army a bit bigger.
So the other thing,
there's going to be some confused-looking Roman auxiliary in the battle line, sort of like feeling a bit schizophrenic.
Yeah. The other thing is with the medium sword as well as the medium spear, with the terrain rules, you're actually more likely to have them in a position where they're going to be useful. So there's much more context to actually take. Instead of these sort of like, someone's managed to fix it so there's only 2 pieces on the table and all those are postage stamps around the edge. With the terrain rules, you've got better chance of actually having an opportunity to utilize them.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good thing. So it will make some of those armies more viable for a lot. So
this means war.
Medium spearmen, who were the bottom of the pile, really, weren't they? I guess.
Yeah, I think it was Levy, medium spearmen, inferior, light foot, than everything else.
Yeah, they're medium swordsmen. So suddenly their impact ability, which has always never really seemed to count, has been replaced with a +1 factor that's part of their basic factor against mounted troops if they're charged from the front. So it's sort of like getting impact all the time, but the cavalry's magic +1 doesn't apply against medium spearmen. It only applies against medium swordsmen. So effectively, they are now 2-1 up against all cavalry in the first round, but are still quite squishy, being medium foot and 3 hits and all the rest of it. But then instead of being 1-1 and they're going to die, they're 2-1 up, and if they start to lose, they're going to die quite quickly. But they could win from being 2-1 up, and I think that I'm not sure there's anything not to like about that, really. And it makes them different to medium sword as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be good fun because Tim, you and I have a samurai army, and our mediums spearmen, who are the compulsory for mediocre. My God, they were dogs.
They were just a waste of time.
Even my horse would hunt them down and go, you know what? I'm basically evens with them. I'll take them. So I think having a subtle difference between medium swordsmen and medium spearmen.
It's a bigger difference than it was. Yeah,
I think it would just give some of those armies that different flavour of not everything being I'm one, you're one. Who rolls a bit of dice? So it'll be fun.
I think one comment I'd have is that what I call, as English players, we seem to sort of plonk down one big lump of heavy infantry and one lump of cavalry and one lot of terrain-specific troops quite often. And I think this is going to encourage more mixed commands, where you have a bunch of heavy infantry and then a couple of cheap medium-foot swordsmen hanging around with them and things like that.
Yeah, Dave, you must be chuffed about the Almugavars as well. That's your troop type of the future.
when we started playing, I played you, and your Norman Knights came on in a flank march and ran straight over my Almugavar spearmen. And I think at the start we all assumed this was the rule that was there, but then we found out it didn't exist. If that makes sense. You know, we thought Almugavars were even with knights, and then we found out they weren't.
They weren't. So suddenly they now become much more viable as a troop type.
So against Impact's heavy cavalry, they're evens, aren't they?
No, they'll cancel the Impact. They'll be up.
All right, okay.
Well, they might even be 3-1 up, actually.
Then.
I think they'll be 3-1 up against me.
Especially when they're elites, yeah.
Yeah, which is great. And then heavy spearmen and pikemen, their impact ability is replaced by this same new integral +1. So one thing I've realised about that is because they used to get a +1 for impact, and now they get a +1 as part of their basic factors in the table. The +1 isn't cancelled by someone being in their flank. So impact was a special ability that whenever someone's hard flanking you, if that's the word, you lose your special abilities when fighting to the front. But this new factor is not impact. It's your base factor. So you still retain it. So that's actually kind of a bit better.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. I don't think so. Because if you're hard
it's only if you receive the charge on your front.
If you're being charged on the front, you still get it, even if someone's because if you've got someone in the flank and the front, you're at 0.
No, there's two things here, Tim. The first one is that if you're hit hard in the flank by anything other than lights, your combat factors drop to 0.
Yeah.
But you don't. If you would normally stop the impact of people charging you frontally, that's not cancelled by being hit in the flank.
Yeah,
so
that's the secret, isn't it?
The enemy's impact for charging your spearmen in the front doesn't work if they're charging you in the front, even if you're defending against somebody hitting you in the flank.
Yeah, actually, that's the difference, isn't it? That's articulate, because before the impact ability was what cancelled the mounted impact. Foot impact cancelled mounted impact, but when you were hard flanked, you lost your own impact, so their impact counted. But so now this is part of your base factor. You always cancel mounted impact with these guys. So it's just to tidy up. It's just a bit more consistently. There's the thing with levy expendable. Can't charge. Can't provide support. Can't pursue.
That's because some people have been a bit cheesy with it.
Yeah, you used to have the levy expendable as basically mobile fortifications or whatever. You could interspace them on the table, and they were just so annoying to deal with.
So they can't come into combat. That's solid.
They can't move themselves up to become a
overlap
on the flank.
They can't. That's it. Yeah, they just do whatever expendable would have done. So wagons, they get some interesting changes. They become better against mounted.
Yeah.
Right. There's some, but they are subject to Zoc, which was a bit bonkers when they weren't. They can turn somehow in a way which I still don't really understand, but we can probably read up. They can shoot after moving, but they don't move much anyway. And then there's this new concept that they do a 1-pip move to become battle ready.
Yeah.
Which, maybe battle ready needs everybody to do the inverted commas thing. We're going to be battle ready. Do it, and they place the stakes, and then they're just even better. But they can't move then from then on until they unlimber or whatever. Limbered and unlimbered. So that's an interesting thing. Anybody use wagons a bit? Or
the interesting bit is they can all shoot.
Yeah, I think
before there was just war wagon, wasn't there? Which is
they did have
sort of mobile.
There were some that didn't shoot, like I can't remember. Indian ones, I think, didn't shoot.
Yeah, there was war wagon and war wagon that shot. So I think having the two types is all good. But also in the version 4, you've got war wagon with blade and contact. Yeah. I think that's going to be great fun. So I used to use them in DVM. But I think having war wagons now be able to move and shoot will make them actually usable, because we all agreed war wagons in version 3 were just a waste of time. And I was looking at the rules. The idea that you can get, because you can now group move war wagons, where before in version 3 you couldn't. If I'm right, then you can group move war wagons.
No, I think you could, but not with other things. But
so you can now get a proper line of infantry move up, and then for the two people, you can have two war wagons side by side, and then in this weird formation, turn 90 degrees, and then basically form 160 mil or 4 UD wide
a wall
offensive line of death against mounted. I just think against some of those mounted armies, it's going to be so beautiful that if you've got the commander and all that, the war wagons move up, deploy and go, right, deal with this. And I can see that as like a Hussite tactic. Would just be great fun against some mad impetuous army just going, well, now what do I do? So I think it just makes the war wagons interesting, because before they were just...
They were just kind of weird because you were just dancing around and ignoring Zocs and just trying to put them somewhere really awkward. But now you can do something with them, maybe.
Yeah.
That's the possibility.
So they're just going to be even more irritated.
No, because they can be Zocked. That's a huge change, because they used to just sail through Zocs and you just
couldn't. Yeah, it's like
handbrake turn them at people.
You just keep on wandering past. But you also couldn't. I think it was you couldn't Zoc anybody else.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to make them actually useful. So some of those armies that can have them, you're just going to actually sit on table, because we've all got.
I think the other thing is, all of us have got 6 war wagons or 8 war wagons from days of DBM for armies where they used to have 6s and 4s and the rest of it. Now we can turn 2 of them into battle ready versions and swap them in and swap them out, so you can do a bit more modeling, which is all kind of good. And then there's these new war wagons with blades, which are the only 3 armies: Camillan Roman, Classical Indian, Communal Italian, which is basically a war wagon you can shove into someone else, and especially elephants.
Yeah, they're great fun.
There's only 3 armies. I think they get like 2 or 3 each, but it's just a hoot, really. Okay, so artillery. This is the fun one, Dave. You've had a go at this already, haven't you? So light artillery can move and shoot, which is good. Elephants and wagons with artillery can shoot after moving, of course. And there's these new types that can fire over friendly infantry and cost 1 pip more, integrated. So that makes that Roman Scorpio formation kind of viable, really, doesn't it? But it's sort of psychological. They're not quite as magical as you think, because they are still a separate piece. Yeah, they're still a separate piece, aren't they? They're still a light artillery. So they've not.
No, I didn't realise that. We played last week, and I didn't realise they could actually operate. And I thought they had to be sitting behind the Roman legionaries all the time. So that's something I learned. They can actually operate on their own. So be aware of that.
Yeah, driving them away from the legions when the legions start getting into combat. But
I think the moving and shooting is a bigger change than the integrated, because light artillery can now move and shoot. I might actually consider taking them. Whereas in version 3, they weren't even a consideration. It was just wouldn't even think about it. Whereas now move and shoot makes a difference. The integrated,
they were reverting one of the Renaissance rules.
I think the integrated is quite interesting for the Romans, because and again, this is the other 25 mil army I've got, and I've got all the models, so it's good. I'll probably take the integrated, because it means if I've got an elephant heavy opponent, well, all of a sudden they're really scared of me. And if I've got an opponent with lots of cataphracts, all of a sudden that goes from, oh god, I'm going to get written down, to, oh, they're going to take quite a few hits before they actually get in. Because you're going to get at least sort of like 3 shots off, and I don't care, you've got heavy armor, so you're going to be sort of like knocking the cats down to.
How are you going to get 3 shots off?
You move up to just inside 4.
You move up to 4, shoot. He moves up to 1. You shoot. You shoot in your turn. Then he charges in.
Yeah.
So you're going to be sort of like.
There's another thing with that, is that normally now people just come up to your legionaries and try to envelop you, which forces the legionaries to charge in, which means they lose their impact ability. With the artillery, people are going to have to charge the impact heavy foot. So that's going to give the Roman legionaries a bit more of an advantage as well.
So I think that the Roman legionaries, I think having a couple, and I've got 2, and I'll probably use both of them, because of that reason. It gives them the ability to reach out and send the love. Heavy armor, elephants, it's sort of like all of a sudden they're looking at the Roman legionary line going, oh, I don't actually fancy that anymore. So I think that might be quite a big change. But being able to move up with the legions and shoot is what does it. If they couldn't move and shoot, it'd still be a waste of time.
Yeah. And also, more importantly, it gives us an excuse to buy some of those really cool models that we see in Donington and all that. We look and go, I want it. I don't have a need for it. Now it's
now it works.
I've already got them.
I think we all have. Yeah.
I've got a couple.
Yeah, I'm looking for my because I've got a Ming army. I can do my Chinese in all the periods. I don't have any these type of artillery, so 20 mil, 1:72 scale.
Scale, yeah. Cards, yeah. Okay.
I was thinking 6.
Yeah, that's a bit much, Dave. Even I know that.
I've got Ming and Yi, or rather Choson Korean.
That works with it.
So yeah, it's quite interesting to try it with them.
That's going to be a really frightening anti-cavalry formation, isn't it? It's like, is that polearm mixed with crossbow with a light artillery behind it or something? Do they do that? That's just nobody's going to get anywhere bloody near that if that's what they're allowed. Okay.
I don't think it is, but
maybe it's probably just spearmen or something. But okay.
This means war.
So then the other biggie, and this is it's the controversial or controversial-ish one. So Light Horse now has a zone of control against everything. They can charge anyone they want, and Light Horse Impact has the Furious Charge ability against foot. There ain't many of them, but that's interesting. And a bonus of +1 when rolling for a flank march if it's entirely Light Horse, which is kind of fun as well. But I guess the Zoc one is a biggie. And I don't know, Dave, you and me have played the game when this has come into its own. Yeah,
I think we'll get used to it. We'll forget that it's controversial, but this makes Light Horse a whole lot more powerful. A whole lot more powerful, because if you sort of pass down a flank with cavalry to turn into the flank, and you've got some Light Horse around, as we worked out last week, it's going to slow the flanking maneuvers for enemies. So I think you're going to suddenly see 3s and 4s of Light Horse appearing on flanks again, which we kind of started off doing because that became like fog, and we found that Light Horse were vulnerable, and now they're going to be very, very useful, if that makes sense. That Light Horse has a Furious Light Horse Impact. So they won't have impact against spear because they lose that. So they won't get it against that, but against other things. So that's why the Han Chinese have suddenly had their Light Horse Impact taken off them. Okay.
Maybe, but it makes your Chinettes possibly better or whatever they are or something. But yeah, I think the couple of games I've played with it, it's interesting because you can use, and I think it's something that we'll all learn, and it will be kind of a list-based solution to it, or list-based response, because a Light Horse that's lurking around, they're more useful late in the game than they used to be, so you don't want to quite throw them away. You've got to protect them a bit more, because they can come in, and when the central infantry battle line or cavalry are trying to start rolling you up, they can zip back in and start harassing people and make them, they can't be ignored anymore. But if you're zocking someone with a Light Horse close to the edge of the table, it means that they can charge you and you can leave the table, or you can be caught, because, and you're also breaking your army up into a lot more pieces that are all quite close to the enemy. Because I think if you look at a normal game, towards the tail end of the game, your Light Horse are scattered to the four winds and are a long way away. But if you've suddenly got a reason to bring them back into combat, you've just got more units to spend your pips on. You can be mugged and die very, very quickly. So I think it's a really interesting one, and it puts them more on a spectrum from Light Horse to medium cavalry to heavy cavalry. It's not the Light Horse class and the cavalry class anymore. That blend from Light Horse to medium cavalry is a seamless
It's going to be annoying to start off with.
It's much more. It's going to be annoying to start with, and then we'll find a solution.
You'll start taking, say, medium cavalry or something as a screen, because you'll have your heavies that you want to come in, and then it'll be rock, paper, scissors with having maybe a light with a medium to see off their lights, and then people end up getting bigger and bigger wings, and then someone will work out that go, well, how about I just ignore them and stick a couple of bowmen on there, and then we'll go through a different meta. But it's going to be annoying to start off with.
Yeah. One thing I think they'd be very useful for is preventing the enemy from attacking the flank of infantry. Because if they can project a Zoc which stops the enemy conforming to the flank of your infantry, that's very useful. Whereas before they couldn't do that. You'd have to physically put the footprint of the light cavalry unit on the flank of the unit you wanted to protect. But now you can keep it about 1 UD back, which means that if the enemy try and charge it, you move away. And if he's charging you, he can't be hitting the flank of your infantry. So I think that's very useful.
I think that's true, but it's still, you're putting really brittle troops very close to the enemy, and you're having more units.
The balance is, the Zoc could be annoying, but the balance is, to use your Zoc, you got to get your light horse very close.
Very bloody
to
close.
something that's kind of dangerous. So there's
but it's
war thing going on.
It may be one of those things you do, like the final turn where you just need to hold your flank for that one turn. So you could also make like the Mongol armies a little bit more viable, because having your flank march getting +1, it's a purely light horse. So I know a bunch of us went to Spain a couple of years ago, and they had this competition. It was medievals or Arab armies of the same period, and so I brought an Arab army to try something different. And in quite a few of the games, you got stuck on the table because you couldn't maneuver around the table because there was just not enough space.
Yeah,
having the ability to have your light horse all coming out on one flank en masse would change the dynamics, that you could actually afford to have your heavy cavalry on table in 2 scattered positions, and then a decent light horse flank attack come in. It would just throw some impetuous knight armies into a little bit of disarray, at least for half an hour.
I'm not sure how useful it will be, because that means you would have to use one of your 3 commanders as a completely light horse command. If it was a +1 for light horse and cav, so you had cav that could go with them as well, I think that would be more. But how it's designing an army where one of your 3 generals can only command light horse is, well, I suppose you could.
Interesting.
Well,
interesting. Dave?
If you've got a Mongol army with a command of, I think some of the Mongol armies can be +5.
6
+6.
2 brilliant generals on the table, a flank march with an ordinary general with 3 light horse elite coming on, and they come on a +1 for the flank march. Suddenly, and then also the Mongol army becomes cheaper because you have more light horse in it.
Yep.
It's going to make some big changes there.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting.
This means war.
So going on the world of lights, although I suppose these are lights which are actually medium cavalry, really, which are now sort of heavy cavalry. So some light chariots can now have the armor ability, Egyptians and Assyrians in particular, which I think is great, because light chariots with hands. Really?
Yeah, your light chariot comes on and everyone goes, here you go, that's a 2 points, nice and free for me.
Yeah, it makes them bow proof. It it means they can fight against infantry much better. It's really big.
I remember
with the heavy cavalry.
Yeah,
it's a good change. It's definitely a good change because it gives them more point to them. Whether it makes them stand up against heavy chariots a bit longer, we'll see. But it makes things like Egyptians and that much more viable.
It just gives them
heavy chariots are only now +1 against mounted, aren't they? So heavy chariot versus light chariot, the heavy chariot's going to be +1 for impact, I think, and that's only in the first round, and both of them are armored, so after that it's going to be an even fight, and that assumes that the light chariot doesn't run away because it can evade anyway.
True. And also with medium infantry getting cheaper, the armies are going to stay roughly the same size.
Yeah, you think so?
Someone on Facebook was complaining, make them too good at fighting. But I don't think it will, because against anyone that's actually quite good at fighting, they'll still get crunched anyhow. Yeah. But what it will do is it'll make them the dominant troop type probably in the High Bronze Age, which they probably should be, because they should be able to dominate rubbish foot. So, it's all...
Also, you used to put them in your army and think, what am I going to do with them?
Yeah, precisely. They weren't the dominant troop.
I'm going to take the minimum. I'm going to take the minimum.
If you think of the New Kingdom Egyptian or the Gallic armies who've got the chariots, you bring them on and everyone trounces them. Now they've actually got a chance in hell of doing something until the medium swords get in.
Yeah. So then heavy chariots, which we just touched on, they now go down to +1 against cavalry instead of +2. So cavalry, who did replace them, they're no longer knights. They're no longer magic knights with wheels. And they're still worse than knights because their impact doesn't count in some way, shape, or form, but they get a bit cheaper. But I don't know. I think
the other thing with the last thing with the light chariots, I was just checking on it, is that you can actually shoot from the rear.
Yeah.
So you can do that sort of turn around, shoot and run off sort of thing, which I think that'll be amusing at times. You get -1 penalty, but you can see that being hilarious.
No, I think that'd be neat. But defanging heavy chariots and turning them away from that old DBM, knights with wheels, I think is grand as well. It's just going to really shake up the biblical period.
Which would be good fun. You actually have some of those big drossy armies actually be able to fight for more than 2 turns. I advance, you charge, I die, I pack up, we go to the pub.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to trying some of this, actually. I think that should be good.
I think ATLG works really well in the biblical period. I think
it does now. I think it was a bit difficult before because light chariots didn't have a role, but now I can really see them having a role. Cataphracts, the other clever cavalry people, so they've now got impact against foot, which possibly they didn't have before, and against mounted. That was the bit. They did have impact against foot, but they didn't have it against mounted, did they? I think possibly.
Yeah, that was correct. Right. Yeah. Because I used to have games with I think it was like Palmyra versus Carthaginian, I think it was. So all the companions they're plus, but I've got better armor. So
yeah,
I always remember that one.
Yeah. So, but do they go up in price or down up in price?
No, I think they stay the same at 13 or whatever, don't they?
No, budget 12, I think. So cataphracts get better against mounted. They no longer become a magnet for medium cavalry impact and medium cavalry impetuous. Just have a go at them with that first round thing.
I think cataphracts are going to become the new elephants.
Yeah, possibly.
Going to end up with cataphracts have just got better, and I think there's. I'm not. We'll see.
I think those can rally cataphracts.
I don't think they needed the +1 against mounted to even them up. That's all I think. I think that was a good thing that they were down against impact heavy cavalry and things.
But what puzzles me about that is they've always got the armor protection. So in actual opportunity of getting hurt, it would be a fairly even fight in the first round. Then after that, the cataphracts got an advantage.
Yeah, but I suppose they were good and they were expensive, and at 12 points each, that's a lot more than, is it 9 for impact?
9 for heavy cavalry. And also the cataphracts are unmaneuverable. So, if you get a frontal charge, life is going to be good. But if you can get into their flanks, you're going to cause them no end of fun.
Maybe this is a historical thing rather than a game balance thing, because in the game, cataphracts are run over by impetuous medium cavalry. That's what attacks them, isn't it? It doesn't. And historically, is that just a load of old tosh? Were they actually just really good, heavily armored knights who just moved a bit more slowly because they've not built better horses?
I have an argument that it depends. In the Roman sort of Palmyran Sassanid thing, I always thought cataphracts were more built for fighting infantry. They were kind of like mounted heavy infantry, and I think they have got that advantage in ADLG. I just wonder whether they needed to be evened up against. They've been given an advantage against mounted.
Yeah, because they've got the armour, but it's cost. They're a third more.
What I fear will happen is it's going to become, like in the medieval period, it's understandable that you have lots of knight armies because that's what the medieval period was about.
Yep.
And the knight is a dominant factor in the medieval. That's very good. I think you're just going to sit there and have cataphract dominating armies in the classical period.
Yeah, it depends on maybe it's a list thing, but we'll see. That one does look a bit bold. So knights now only have a +1 factor against cataphracts, but there's some changes to impact, which means they still stay up. And knights without impact get cheaper. That's the thing, which there isn't many of them, but they were just utter rubbish. So it's difficult to see that being something anyone could argue against, really. This is just a grading issue.
And even then, would you still take knights without impact?
If my army was going to give me that option, I would, but generally, no. The whole point
just if you're allowed to dismount them, probably. So elephants. Dun, da, da. So now there's 2 types of elephants that are really good. There's armored elephants and elite elephants, which are different. So some are more resilient, but not as resilient in a different way. And they must pursue after melee. Dun, 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 dun.
Big change, that one, isn't it?
Big change. I don't know. Peter, you're the Elephant King and the Knight King. What are you thinking on this?
I think it's going to be a big change. It's a necessary change, especially some of the armies. It was almost like you had to take elephants. Now they're being put down to mediocre or ordinary. And there's a lot more things that can actually go at it, from the Naftons and the light infantry to socket and things like that. So I think it was necessary, because it's the meta, certainly in some of the tournament games, were like, you'd have someone with Jurchen Chen or Gaz
Max elephants, yeah.
And it was getting too much. It was getting boring, to be honest, even though I like elephants a lot. So I quite like that. It's just, has it gone, are cataphracts going to become the new elephants? I don't know, because they still don't have the fear factor that elephants do against mounted. So I think elephants are going to be more properly utilised in certain armies, as opposed to, I'm picking an army for a tournament, I need to have at least 1 elephant in.
I suppose if cataphracts become the new elephants, then elephants will become the new elephants.
Yeah.
Because they're devastating against cataphracts. Absolutely devastating against them.
I think it'll possibly reduce the sort of, as we call it, as we've christened it, the Death Star of 2 or 3 elephants surrounded by medium foot and light foot. You'll probably end up with elephants more in the battle line or operating individually.
Yeah, no, I think it's right. And if it means that there's a choice, because when you were looking at a list, you'd almost start by saying, I'll have all the elephants.
Yes.
So actually now, there's other ways of doing it. It's not a no-brainer, so that's good.
Yeah, I like it. I like the change.
So camels.
Sorry, just thinking, like, how you're saying with the army list, you think of like the Indian army. So the classical Indian army has a lot of medium swordsmen and other stuff, which you never choose. You basically go for 6 elephants, a couple of elite 200 choppers, and the impetuous swordsman, whoever you can get, to make that nice Death Star. Now you think, actually, I might go for 10 medium swordsmen and 4 elephants, just because you've got to have a few elephants and they look so cool. But it just, as Peter was saying, it changes the meta and that view of, I'm not buying an army by the biggest powerful troop possible and then the rest of the troops. It's, you actually look at the army list and go, there's some options here. What could I do? And what do I want to do?
Okay. And then last mounted one, camels. Impetuous cavalry are no longer subject to an uncontrolled charge against camels or elephants, which is kind of sensible. And medium camels and light camels with bows in all lists are now mediocre. So the double-armed, super devastating Bedouin bloody machine gun nonsense has been cut off at the knees, which I've obviously got an opinion on, which I think I've probably just given away there.
I think you lost to me in one of those.
I think I beat you actually, Peter. Just in the end.
I had my shotgun. The
shotgun camels. The shotgun camels.
But I actually dismounted. I think I dismounted, so I ended up with a load of impetuous infantry.
Yeah,
which you could still get, which is a lot of fun. People think they're facing up against camels. You just mount everything and just charge in like a lunatic.
Let's tune something else. Yeah. Okay. So anybody got any issues with nerfing the double-armed bow Bedouin camels? Not really.
I got nothing. I've never used camels before.
Yeah. Pole arms, the brand new weapon class. So a lot of the medieval and Dark Ages two-handed cutting weapon men who are actually halberdiers are now called pole arms, which are basically two-handed cutting weapon, but they only work against mounted in the way that, and they count as almost spearmen. So they're almost spearmen with two-handed cutting weapon against mounted.
I'm a bit dubious on the historicity of that. Certainly for the Eastern armies, so Chinese, Korean, so on, I could see that sort of the pole arms there were aimed as anti-cavalry, but Western Europe, when you're talking later Western Europe, so was Rose's era, the pole arms were actually anti-armor rather than
the historic. It's absolutely. If you look at the Swiss,
the Swiss
were originally pole arms in deep formations that they used to give mounted knights a kicking. Then mounted knights got off their horses and started using their spear as lances, and that's when the Swiss went to pikes. So late medievals, them sort of pole arms were designed around chopping up heavy armor and pulling people off horses. So I'm happy enough with that.
If you look at the falchion and the various halberds, you can see they've got the hook to get the knight off the horse, and then you put the hook around the helmet. You can start levering open the full plate armor.
It's one great big tin opener.
Yeah,
I mean, go see it in the Tower of London. They're very much designed to basically poke into someone on a horse and have the hook to pull them down and then chop them to bits. It's it even describes that some even have the hammer to crack it open. It's a serious walnut cracking method. So I like what it's done. It's a bit more flavour.
The list where we're saying it's more late 15th century.
I can see where Tamsins coming from.
And by then, sort of mounted, most knights, men at arms, were fighting dismounted.
Yeah, because they had the pole arms.
I can see where Tamsins coming from. I think in the War of the Roses period.
Yeah.
That the billman was there to fight against. I mean, there weren't many mounted knights around for a start.
Yeah.
But then I think what's kind of good in that period, it means that foot knights are better than billmen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Important. But I think the really big factor is the Far East. The Chinese have been severely downgraded by this.
Yeah, the Chinese become totally changed because they used to be, an anti-pike, an anti-spear, army of tin openers, which was nothing like how they fought historically. But I think Tamsin, I think I am with you though. I suspect the answer to kind of put your question another way. I wonder if the polearm class has been applied too uniformly at the back end of the book. I think most of them are absolutely right, but I wonder if there's a few that might have been better as two-handed cutting weapon as well. But so in the main, it's right, but I think it might be a list issue that they may look back and go, maybe it. But it will possibly put more focus onto having dismounted knights, cutting things open, and it might have been applied too easily. But it's going to totally change the way Chinese armies play, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I'm looking for. I think it'll be because I've got quite a few Chinese armies. It's going to be interesting because a lot of my stuff was all two-handed choppers, and it was great here. If I win, I add +1, and if I beat pike or spearman, I break the ties. So it's going to change quite a few of the just the way you think of the army. I'm still going to play them anyway because I just like the idea of
the Chinese army's been really heavily smashed by lots of things.
No, but Dave, I think it's been smashed if you look at it as an open period army, in which it was in the same period as the classical Greeks and when it was brilliant against pike and spear. But if you say, against the historical opponents, which are all cavalry, now suddenly you've got like super spearmen backed up by archers, which will make a bloody nightmare for cavalry, who actually would normally have had a go at them. So it's going to be really hard.
I meant it in terms of like the hand of lost, the heavy chariots lost a factor.
Yeah,
they've had their light horse impact removed, and they've got the two-handed. I mean, with the Han army, you march forward with 6 ordinary two-handed weapon guys, and that was pretty damn good. But I think it's a great change. It's just a major change in certain armies. Yeah.
Can I just check on the rules because I haven't read them properly yet? Do pole arms cancel the impact of the mounted?
No, they get a +1 against them, which in the first round I think is how it works, isn't it?
Okay, so in effect,
so it'll be 2-2 against mounted.
Okay.
In the first round, and if they win, they get +1, like two-handed weapon stuff. So they're kind of nearly spearmen, but better if they start winning. Yeah. But I think you just have to use the Chinese differently. It isn't 6 two-handed cutting weapon men who go hunting spears and pikes. It's a big army that's going to rely on shooting and will be able to go after the enemy mounted with these mixed formations and really cause them a lot of trouble. So, I think that's an interesting one. And then Atlatl for the Atlatl is shooting at 2, which fine.
Definitely agree with.
Should have been done a long time ago.
This means war.
Impact half bow. So this is basically saying that most of the Byzantine and the horrendous Jurchen Chin nonsense are now slightly nerfed, and they shoot as one layer lower. And there's only a handful of proper impact bow cavalry who are the elite in these armies, with 2 or 3 bases, or maybe 4 for the Mongols. But all the rest of them are a little bit worse at shooting.
So can I just ask? So Dave, the Byzantine armies that I think we fought against, this is what this is for, isn't it? So the ones who are heavy cavalry, bow, impact, elite, armored, the whole French kit caboodle type of army. Is this the one that's getting downgraded slightly?
Well, it is exactly that. I think, as Tim says, the Mongol guards stay the full Monty. And then I think the only Byzantine army which keeps it is you keep 4 of them in the Justinian army, which is nice because that's Belisarius's Bucalari. But all the other armies, I think, I'm reading it right? I think medium cavalry impact bow have completely disappeared.
I think they might have, yeah. I think they might have completely.
No, there's some of them in a couple of things.
Okay.
Really? I couldn't find any. So things like the Jurchen, because the Jurchen Chin had like 4 heavy cavalry bow impact elites, and the rest were medium cavalry. And I think that was nonsense. That's destroyed that, which I think that's a really good thing, because that was too cheap, too easy.
That was a nonsense.
I fear that this does make those armies that have got the half bow lance very, very susceptible to put, the mixed bow spear units and the bowmen. But we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah, but I suppose how much difference being mediocre shooting at factor 0. It means your 5s and 6s and 4s go down 1, but everybody's shooting on a defensive 1. Does it really? Were you shooting that much with these troops anyway?
Yeah, I think what you would have to do is come up with a line of Byzantine cavalry. You have to come up and weaken the enemy foot with your bow fire. But I think now, because the infantry bow get more shots at you, and they get a +1 for shooting it mounted, then it's. Yeah. I mean, it means the Byzantines have to mix up their army units again. I think a lot of these things that we're looking at are going to mean very mixed commands.
Yeah.
With a few of this and a few of that. So you get penny packets. You're going to get 1 cavalryman inside with infantry and things like that. And I think it gives the balance. It gives the larger, the command levels in armies more relevant.
Yeah, because what it will do is, I think it's going to stop the more simplistic tactic of a group of 5 of these cavalry bow advancing, shooting, charging, and going for it. They're going to actually have to use their command rating to do a lot of manoeuvring and try to get into.
They're going to have to win rather than just line up and shoot and let the troop type win.
You might actually get some historical, hopefully some historical tactics being used. Like Mongols can't charge to the front, but a big, heavy foot arm, sort of stand there and go, bring it type of thing. So,
I think you're right, Dave. I think they have split out. I thought I did see one, but the normal ones that have that medium cavalry impact bow don't have it anymore. They've split those out, but even the number of ones that have the heavy cavalry impact bow or add impact, they've reduced the number you could actually take.
Yes. Yeah, I found Mamelukes can have 4. That seems, and the Mongols seem to be the only ones in that kind of era with any serious number of these guys.
Okay. All right. Well, look, next up is there's a handful. I think there's only 4 or 5 armies here that have now. Well, actually, no, light chariots with javelin that can shoot, which is a new thing, and there's a handful of medium cavalry who've got a javelin ability, so they can shoot at 1, but they don't gain a benefit in combat. So it's basically some cavalry can now shoot at 1, and light chariots can now shoot at 1. So I suppose that's a bump for those light chariots, which is nice in that biblical period to make them a bit more kings of the battlefield. And the other stuff, I'm struggling to be overexcited about it. It's interesting. It's you're only going to get one shot, aren't you? Really?
Yeah. It's nice, but it's not going to be a game changer.
I think it will mean you get some mixed light horse and medium cavalry commands and things like that.
Actually, you can bully the enemy's light horse quite well, can't it? It really can.
What's good is there's become more of a place for medium cavalry in some armies, like you said, the Numidians and things like that, and the Spanish. And another thing I noticed, like we talked about the Justinian Byzantine armies always had the ability to have 2 Hun elite light horse. Now they can be medium cavalry elite, that makes them more, it makes the Huns a little bit more terrifying.
Yeah. Okay. So missile support has changed. So missile support now counts against heavy armor, which basically means counts against knights and cataphracts. So supported spearmen, supported Romans, they get that +1 if they lose against proper opponents. Because missile support was the thing that no one ever took. It cancels the furious charge of mounted troops. And then that's a big with that +1.
That's going to be a game changer, or actually making missile support justifiable.
Yeah.
My leagues have definitely got rear support now.
And that's going to be where your points that you're gaining back from the auxilia come from, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah.
Legion troops got cheaper and you're going to chuck those in, yeah.
Heavy troops are going to get heavier. And then the mixed units and the bowmen don't have free missile support ability, which they sort of used to have if losing in the first round, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth for the mixed units, though. I guess that's a
big change. I haven't spotted that one. That's a massive change.
Yeah, I was reading that one and I had to I scratched my head a few times. So it's clear you've actually got to pay for missile support now. So even though you've got a bow or a gun or whatever, you don't get that +1 if you lose.
I'm not sure there's actually any mixed units that can have missile support.
No, but I think it's a nice simple mechanic now of you only get +1 if you lose, if you paid for it. Otherwise, don't argue, don't go to the forum, just move on. So it's a nice simple way of remembering it now.
It's going to make certain armies even more of a dog for normal. Like Numidians were bad enough. Nubians were bad enough already.
Yeah, but I'm not sure there was a great Nubian world empire, was there? But or something. But
I thought the Nubians were appalling enough when I played in Tamsin, weren't they?
Yeah.
I think they got any better.
The other thing that I thought with the mixed units was I always thought mixed units with swordsmen in front were a bit ropey, and they now become even ropier, whereas ones with spears in front don't really care because they've still got the spears in front, so they don't care so much about mounted.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just that, it's the same way that medium spear and medium sword become 2 different classes. Maybe the mixed bow sword formations are just a different thing now to to being mixed spear sword.
They always were. But who do you want to? If you've got medium sword bow, who do you want to fight?
Yeah, maybe you want to fight.
Well, I think the mixed
javelinman
medium sword bow more often appear in the biblical age.
And they're normally the Persians, aren't they?
Yeah, they're biblical Persian and before that, the Assyrians and things like that. And maybe that's a counter of the heavy chariots losing one factor.
I think some of the Chinese lists might have been sword bow.
And also the classical Indian.
They've added the pole arm.
Yeah.
Well, I look at it slightly different way.
Only on certain units.
Yeah. Because if you've got a bowman, LMI bow ordinary, that costs 7 points. For 8 points, you get you don't lose any shooting ability, but for 1 point more, you get some swordsmen who will give you a bit of staying power if somebody wants to charge you. So I think that's actually worth having.
Yeah.
They've also had one other factor which is interesting. They can now charge cavalry.
True.
Because in the past they had to stand there and shoot the cavalry.
Yeah.
And just act as bowmen, because bowmen weren't allowed because they're treated as bowmen. Bowmen aren't allowed to charge anything. Now bowmen are allowed to charge. They can actually charge. So they
can always charge the council and overlap.
Yeah. It will make like a Death Star with an elephant and 2 mixed swordsmen a little bit more interesting, or medium speed. So it's going to make the mixed units a bit more enjoyable, but also a bit squishy.
Yeah, maybe it's just maybe Andy, it's the thing you said there. It's they're bowmen that cost 1 point extra and have a bit more combat ability, and that's what you got to think of them as. Yeah. They're still units of bowmen.
I think 1 point for 1 point they're worth having.
Yeah, they're units of bowmen. We're just missing the points there at someone. So dismounting has been revised. Some cavalry now dismount as heavy swordsmen or heavy spearmen with 3 hit points. Impetuous cavalry no longer count as impetuous once dismounted, which I'm very happy about because I thought that was bonkers. That was just ridiculous before.
But impetuous camels do stay impetuous swordmen.
Yeah, but that's only one army, isn't it? That's the Tuaregs, and they were all nuts.
It's the one I've got.
It's the one you've got, which is right. The Tuaregs would have been like that, and there's just some different dismount categories, and then there's a few exceptions in the lists who do dismount as impetuous medium swordsmen, but most aren't doing the cheesy dismount as armored elite impetuous swordsman or something.
My Hindu impetuous heavy cavalry when faced with
elephants.
When faced with elephants, went, we'll get off our horses.
Be the best troops in the game.
We'll slaughter your impetuous medium foot because we're elite, armored, and
impetuous.
No, I'm struggling to disagree with this at all. I think it's sensible. It's not. Yeah. So right, you don't general rules then. So activation, you don't need dice to activate an invisible core first, which just makes flank marches a bit more interesting, which is fine.
Yeah.
The heavy infantry one, they may advance 3 UD in open terrain if they start their movement at least 4 from the enemy or 4 or more from the enemy. So
I think this is great. Because you can now got a justification for giving especially like your legionnaires, you give them a brilliant general, and in turn 1, if you roll well enough, you can run your legionnaires or spearmen in the medieval armies up someone's guts rather than going, I'll move 2 UD, clunk, I'll move 2 UD. If you can actually get your swordsman halfway across the table in 1 turn, or even 4 or 6 UD, you've got a chance in hell of actually doing something, and it will cause a few armies to actually go off kilter. So I think it's good fun.
Similarly for pike armies.
Yeah. In my medieval Scots army, I ran at a campaign one year where it was 14 elements of mediocre pike, and seeing that charging across the table is just going to be great fun.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting one because I played a few games now, and it's where it seems to come in is not necessarily those early moves. It helps in the early moves, but you are still stopped from doing a second or third move by someone at 4. You can't march beyond it, but it's after that
Yeah.
So the skirmish screen stops you at 4 away from the skirmish screen, but then your next move isn't still 3. It's the ability to throw themselves into combat a bit later on in the game that it kind of comes into its own.
Yeah, because sometimes you get halfway through a game, the ones against you would either run off or you killed a few, and you just know that you'd got, like, say, 4 heavy infantry, and there was no way they were actually going to catch.
There was no point in even spending pips on them, was there? They just sat there.
One thing I would query is, so say you've got a line of heavy infantry, and you've got no light foots in your army to sit in front of them. So if heavy infantry move up to 4.1 centimeters, do they then move 3 to almost 1 of the enemy?
Yes.
No.
No, they do.
Yeah,
but you can't do that. No, but you can't do it as a second move because you're still stopped at 4.
No. So you move. So you move up and sit. You move to a point where you're 4.1 centimeters.
No, you move up
4.1 UD.
No, you can move up. The rules are very clear, and I think this is one of the nice things they've made clear in version 4. You move up to 4 UD.
Yeah.
So it's not like in DBM or FOB where you had to remain outside. Now they've made it abundantly clear you can move up exactly 2. And they also done the same thing to the ZOC, the way they explained the ZOC. So if you put a ZOC marker down and the ZOC marker fits exactly into it, so it's, 1 UD square, you're not ZOC'd. You've got to be inside the ZOC. And I think that's it annoys me, but at least it's a clear clarification. You have to be inside to be in. The effect, if you're at it, you're okay. So it's going to make like the Swedish Ledang or Viking armies. They can actually get across the table a little bit and actually run after armies. As Peter was saying, once the armies are broken apart, you can actually then try to chase things down rather than looking going, there is no way in hell I'm going to get that many foot.
Slides, if you're charging or contacting an enemy, you don't have to advance 1 UD in order to slide. So that's just making it easier to get into combat, isn't it? Without some sort of artificial malarkey. Not really got an issue with that. We probably were doing that anyway without noticing, I suspect.
Could you, in that case, if you were just out, I'm just trying to think of how that affects being in and out of ZOC. So would it make it easier to be able to pick your target rather than fight that one that you probably are going to fight? I don't want to fight the elephant. I want to fight the chap next to him. Would that make that easier?
If you're already ZOC'd, whoever your fight is determined by the ZOC. What it means is, I think where it makes a difference is if you're very close, you're in a position to almost be an overlap, but there was a weird thing that you had to advance forward a full UD in order to slide across into overlap. Now, if you end in overlap, you can advance forward half a UD and slide across as long as you end up touching someone. So I think it's just a geometry fix. I don't think it's much more.
Yeah. I think the key thing is knowing which is the most threatening opponent. That's the key thing for most close moves.
Yeah. So extensions, you can now move forward and expand at the same time, but you do lose a lot of movement for doing so. So
okay, I tried to read those rules and I didn't understand it. So that makes sense. So you can actually now move and expand a little bit.
You can move and expand, but even if you're cavalry, so cavalry have got a move of 4. If they move forward 1 UD, they can expand by 2.
Okay.
Their moves 4, they lose 1 just for doing a move and expandy thing, and they lose 1 for each base they expand. So cavalry could, the furthest forward they could do is advance 2 and expand by 1. So
it's nice because it always bugged me a little bit that the cavalry couldn't, or light horse couldn't move and expand even a little bit. So you're going to get 1 or 2 UD. Just means you can do something.
Yeah. And then light horse can contract by 4 units instead of 3. Who puts 4 light horse in a line? Don't know. Minor detail. exiting a Zoc, you do it by doing an evade move now.
Yeah.
You roll for an evade move. You don't choose how far you go yourself. Or no, it used to be you went as far as you could, didn't it?
Yeah.
Now it's kind of a bit more random. Which a bit of a laugh.
I think this is good. This makes the rule simpler and cleaner. Is in if you can evade, if you exit Zoc, you evade. End of story. So it just makes the I thought type of rules. It's you evade. There you go.
Yeah, just out of it. Sometimes they just can't get back. It's because they roll long or they roll short and they end up in the wrong place. It's kind of fun.
In the past, if you've got a line of heavy cavalry bow facing something and shooting, they had to turn around 180, go back their full move -1, and they were still showing their arse to the enemy. Now they go back and they're facing the right direction. So if the enemy comes up again, they can shoot again.
But they only go 2 UD now. So I think.
I don't think so.
That's a big one. When you evade, you still stay facing the right direction.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
No, you turn around and go backwards.
Light infantry, light troops do, but not cavalry.
Sorry, I was thinking the break off. My apologies, I was wrong.
Yeah, I think light troops turn, but I don't think cavalry do.
It's only light horses. Okay, right.
Yeah. So, and then anybody else who's pinned by a slower enemy can just march out, which is fine. Into penetration, they're just, that shifting thing. If you're shifted, you can't then move, which was something that was FAQ'd in version 3 anyway. We've been playing that for years. There's a very odd corner case thing about sliding along the front of an enemy that is almost impossible to ever have happen. The charge procedure has been explained in much more painstaking detail, which is much, much clearer in the move sequence. And they make it clear that if you are charging as a group and you're not ending up in a support position, you can just carry on charging and try and hit something new. So groups can break up, which is fine. Uncontrolled charges can't go into a kind of catcher's mitt where they end up hard flanked. Mm-hmm. That's a reason for it as well. It's just all common sense stuff, that really, isn't it? You can't block and evade with the back corner of your base. No more buttocks of death in this one. It's tidy, bit better. Just trying to think. Yeah, more buttocks of death gone. Conforming has been tidied up and put together in a whole chapter about conforming, because that was a dead confusing bit for a long time, wasn't it?
A lot of pictures for that as well, so I think it's really good with the explanations. Yeah,
loads and loads of explanations. We're chugging through this one. So combat melee, we've already talked about bowmen. Mixed units can now charge everybody. There's this new hard flank, simple support and melee support. So it basically is a +1 for to what it was if you're hit in the flank by somebody who's half decent, is the gist of it.
Yes.
So can you run that by me again? I tried to read the rules. I didn't understand this one.
Okay. So in the past, if you're fighting someone face to face,
yep,
and then one of your friends comes and hits them in the flank, you would get a +1 for that.
Yeah, you get the overlap. That's it.
Now you get the overlap +1 plus their basic factor, which is almost always 1.
+2.
Pikeman is always +2. Light infantry is 0. So you get the same as you did before, plus their basic combat factor.
So does that mean you wouldn't get the impact bonus, but spear and pikes would get their special +1 bonus?
Because that's in their basic factor. Although the spear and pike special +1 bonus is only if they receive a charge, so they so they can't get it.
Okay. So if you had if you got 2 units fighting each other normally, all is good. Somehow you've managed to get a pikeman on the guy's flank.
Yep.
You turned the previous turn.
Yep.
In this turn, he charges the enemy unit in the flank.
Yep.
So you get, say for example, you've got Swordsman versus Swordsman, so you're one. Life is good. The enemy unit drops to -1, gets a disrupted marker.
Yep.
He then fights 0, -1 for being disrupted. So he's -1. You are 1 swordsman.
Yep.
2 for the overlap.
Yep.
So +1 for the overlap.
And no, it's not 2 for the overlap.
No, he's doing the factors.
+1, overlap +1, and then you get the +2 for the pike.
You do, absolutely, yeah. So you do 4 -1, and that would be over quite quickly.
That's going to.
Then again, if you hit someone in the flank with a pike, that should happen, shouldn't it? I guess if you can do that.
Pike are no longer unmaneuverable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you can do all those,
if you can do it, well done. Fill your boots, mate.
But pike aren't unmaneuverable though.
Because it's really bloody awkward. Because they're unmaneuverable, Peter. That's
they're
what
not
we're saying.
Unmaneuverable.
No, okay. Well, they're nearly unmaneuverable.
One thing it does do is it adds. Do you know you said that mediocre swordsmen are only 4 points, nearly 3. Being mediocre doesn't matter if they're the ones going into the flank, so that makes them quite useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dave's eyes lighting up.
Definitely.
That's why I need to buy more Indians.
Contact on the flank by a pursuing unit when already in melee loses a cohesion point. So again, that's just tidying up as well, isn't it?
No, that was good because before, if you were in a melee and you pursued and hit somebody in the flank who was fighting frontally, they didn't drop, and you had to wait until your own turn to get any advantage. Yeah, that's quite good.
There's some new stuff. There's obstacles, which are ditches and pits. Caltrops. It's a combat obstacle that doesn't provide shooting cover. Whoopie-doo. Some people get Sacred Camp, which is like a fortified camp without fortifications.
I think that'd be great for like the Italian armies that have the Carroccio, because you have just an excuse to bring that core model on the table.
We've done the thing on initiative for light infantry. Terrain, this is kind of good. So there's now the terrain's clearer. It's been rewritten, and there's now more terrain pieces. So both players can choose 2 of the same thing in pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Which is the dominant. And there's some clever stuff in terrain that makes it harder for terrain not to end up on table. Is the gist of it.
And for terrain not to end up all on one side of the table.
Exactly. So terrain should now be more spread, which, Adam, that's great news for Dacians, really, isn't it?
They're looking forward to fighting in the mountains or the forest.
It's really good.
Or the plains.
One thing it stops is somebody saying, right, when there were 3 fields, it was often right, I'll take 2 fields and make them really tiny just to prevent you having a field. You can only have 1 field. Now you can take 2 fields and the other person gets 2 fields. That's a big change. That's good.
Yeah. The road is now random. Hooray! It's no longer the boring, tedious road along the back, which is great.
And the impassable terrain only in flank sectors.
In the flank sectors, that's nice as well.
So that Dave having the impassable in his deployment zone and then trying to evade into the impassable.
You can't rotate pieces on a 3 or 4.
That's a big one.
Not sure I'm fussed.
Really good. That's very good.
Yeah, that's not as cheesy. And then we're just into really a different thing about army lists, which is a bit more flexibility in some of the small minima. So effectively, minima of 2 in a real army list no longer need to be taken. So you don't necessarily
an ally contingent.
An ally contingent, sorry, yeah. You don't end up with some of these kind of odd things where they've got to have 1 of these and 2 of these, and it just doesn't really bloody work because there's too many bits, which is kind of cool. And then there's more strategists, which is lovely, and you don't have to take a strategist as a strategist to field those troops. So all those armies that were sort of slightly hamstrung by having to be
Hannibal's veterans.
Hannibal can have a bad day and be fielded as competent. So that's all good. Really, that's kind of the summary, isn't it? Are we all? Shall we just give it a? Actually, this reminds me of when I had a job. This was something someone used to do. Votes out of 5 for it. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Run down the thing. Simon, where are you on this one? Give me a score out of 5.
For me, 5 out of 5. It's going to shake the game up. It's going to make it interesting. It changes the meta. It makes me buy some more models. And it makes the game a bit more interesting rather than you've basically paid for an FAQ.
Yep. Tamsin, what about you?
5.
Simple, straight, 5. Yep. All good. Dave, Mr. Saunders.
4 with a reticence about the light horse and the cataphracts.
Yeah. Adam, Mr. Dacian.
I would say 3 going up to 4. And I only say 3 going up to 4 because it's like, yeah, changes are fine. It'll be fine. But I quite enjoyed version 3, and version 3 I thought was fine as well. So changes, good. The one thing that I do like, though, is I always thought elephants were overpowered.
Yeah.
And quite a few of the changes have taken them down a notch, and I'm sure they'll still be fine. But as you said, if you could have elephants, you usually would have. And when you get a troop type you're not making choices about, they were overpowered. So then coming down a bit, I think is a good thing.
Okay. Peter, what about you?
I'm 4 to 5. The only reason why it's lost a notch is some of the lists where they've overdone it with the pole arms as opposed to having 2-handers. But overall, I'm very pleased. I really enjoyed version 3. I think I'm going to enjoy version 4. I like the fact that the meta's changed. I like the fact that they've changed the dynamic with the elephants and the impact bow, because it was just getting a bit too tired. So I think it's a good mix.
I think I'd actually echo exactly that. I think, you're right. There's a couple of things that you suck sort of through the teeth and go, is that a little bit too much? But ultimately, there are so many other good changes in it that if no set of rules is ever perfectly balanced, and we're making this stuff up without ever really having played.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
I don't think there's anything in there that I dislike without having played it. Having played it, there may be 1 or 2 things I've got queries, but I don't think so. So instinctively, I'd give it a 5.
Good, fantastic.
I mean, I particularly like it that they've taken the time to explain more. Like the conforming and some of the other bits, which certainly in tournaments sometimes people can get a bit funny. So I think they've done really a good job. That you could see people who have taken on board, and we know the people involved as part of the committee have reviewed it.
Sounds good.
Really good.
And the pictures are good as well, of course. All the fantastic pictures. Fantastic. Well, look, I think on that note, then we'll move on, and that's our wrap up so far of almost having played version 4. So
this means war.
So look, we've overrun on that one, so we will just crack on and roll up this week with the quiz. So let's roll that funky music, French boy. Mr. Finkel, or shall we call you Galaxy A41 from now on?
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Galaxy A41, beam in. I'll try and find some weird sound effects and to play under the bottom of this, and give us your asteroid space themed quiz answers from 2.5 weeks ago.
Right. Well, the question were about lack of leadership, and I asked what was the reason for lack of leadership by each of the following generals in the American Civil War. The first one was Union Commander Joe Hooker on the second day of the Battle of Chancellorsville in 1863. Anyone know?
Is he dead? Was he shot?
No. He wasn't shot. Pardon?
It's usually syphilis then, isn't it, with the Civil War?
Concussion.
Concussion.
Shot at yet the previous day.
Well, not quite. Well, he was alleged to be drunk, which was true some of the time, but not this time. It was more likely to be concussion because a roof timber fell on his head when his headquarters was bombarded by Confederate artillery. The army has a song called Joe Hooker is our leader. He likes his whiskey strong. So when he was out of command most of the time, it was because he was pickled. But this time it was because a roof beam fell on his head, which would probably impair most people's command abilities.
Okay, then. Right. Mr. John Lee Hooker, then. That's him. Hit us with the next question.
Right. The next one was, what was the reason for incapacity of James Ledley at the Battle of the crater, or pimple if you prefer, in 1864?
Can I say syphilis again? Just because I've now become, that might be my answer to all of these, if they're American Civil War.
You may say syphilis. Did a beam of wood fall on his head?
Pardon?
Did a beam of wood fall on his head?
Well, he was in a crater. He was pissed, that's right. He got drunk and was completely incapable of issuing orders to his colored troops who got trapped in the crater.
Right. Okay, then. Another drunkard. Well, that's a man after our own hearts. And question number 3.
It was George Pickett at the Battle of Five Forks in 1865. So what reason was it that he couldn't exercise command that day?
He's laughing too much at the Two Ronnies sketch that he was nearly part of?
He was picketed.
No.
Syphilis.
No. The answer is gone fishing.
He'd gone fishing?
Yeah, the senior commanders went on a shad bake. That's apparently an American sort of outdoor trip for trying to catch shad. And unfortunately for them and their troops, the Union launched a major attack that day, which captured their position. That led to the fall of Petersburg and ultimately surrendered by Lee 8 days later. So while all this battle was going on and the Petersburg line was being broken, he and the senior commander were fishing and having a picnic on a barbecue.
Having a shad bake. Well,
it might not have been so much of a problem if they'd actually told their subordinates where they were going fishing.
Okay.
Nobody knew.
It was a mystery shad bake.
Cannons and think, well, perhaps we ought to go and find out what's going on, but obviously they didn't. No, right.
No. Let's hit us with the music then, and we'll be back in a moment.
Question, comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond. Question, la légende le dit. Question, elle dit aussi. Question, c'est une maladie.
We are back in a moment. Astonishing. So Andy, hit us with some quick fire questions on whatever weird theme comes from Galaxy A41 this week.
Well, you have a choice really. You've got line of duty or heads of state. So which would you like?
Line of duty is so passé now. Let's do heads of state.
That's what I thought you'd do. Okay, right. So these are 3 quotes by heads of state. I just want to know who made these quotes. War is much too serious a thing to be left to military men.
Okay.
Right. So what head of state said that? Which head of state said Belgium is a country invented by the British to annoy the French?
Okay.
And the third one is, I'd like to know which head of state said, you can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted all the other possibilities.
Okay, we're nodding. We'll let you zoom off back to Galaxy A41 and goodbye, and roll the French music as your rocket ship takes off.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Comment les voir? Question, le trou est sans fond. Question, la légende le dit. Question, elle dit aussi. Question, c'est une maladie. Question.
Oh, that was a little bit of Gallic. That was a little bit of a Gallic French space interlude, which we weren't really expecting. And I think on that note, we're going to wrap up early actually, and skip the battle reports as it is cracking on for us. But hopefully we've entertained you and maybe not enlightened you about version 4, because you've already read it yourself already. Everybody's been pouring through it. The internet's gone bonkers for it. As time wraps up, so just a quick run around for what you've got coming in the next kind of couple of weeks. So Adam, what about you? What's on the paint table and the gaming table for the next couple of weeks?
Blimey, it's well, when there's a day that it's not raining, I'm gonna do some undercoating and carry on with my lovely Swiss pipe block
with the Perrys. Peter, what about you? What's going on in Docklands?
I'm going to finish off my Arabs, and I actually have a game booked with the Mr. Saunders on Monday night. So I'm going to help him do some practice ready for his competition up in York. So I'm going to bring something.
Is that in the pub? Is that in the pub where we meet?
Actually, in real life. In the pub, yeah.
Going to the pub.
In real life. So Dave, we know half of what you're doing. Then what are you doing in the week before you become employed?
Yeah, exactly. Which is a tragedy, so considering the pub's just opened and we can actually play war games again. And I'm playing Gordon on Monday afternoon, and then I'm playing Pete on Monday evening, and I'm painting Franks and spending some money now. I can see some money on the horizon.
Now you've got some. All right. Galaxy A41. What planet are you going to be on the next 2 weeks?
Swordsman, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Probably painting some 10mm Germans and probably actually finally finish that project, which will sort of be good. And then if certain figures arrive, they might need some rebasing. So
yes, that is a possibility. Yes, that might happen tomorrow, maybe even. Okay then, Tamsin, what about you? What's your next fortnight? Is it finishing hills, or are there going to be little people on them?
Finishing the hills, and then I think I've been prepping some Judge Dredd figures, so I might paint those.
Back to the favourites. And Simon, what about you?
I have absolutely nothing on the painting table, which is a tragedy. But I can see they've got a whole bunch of changes to try and get my head around how do I adapt Renaissance to version 4 of the rules.
Okay. Very scary. Well, I'll have to see if I can deliver something to you that requires rebasing as well. And I think from my point of view, there's probably a bit of rebasing going on. I might start undercoating some 15mm Spanish, possibly, because I've had that on the list, or I might paint up some other stuff that I've already got undercoated. But I've got a week off down on the south coast. In fact, doing a scouting mission for the Devonian Classic competition, which is going gangbusters at the moment. There's like about 24 people already signed up, nearly all of them in 25mm. It's going to be like a 20-strong 25mm competition at least, down in Brixham in Devon at the beginning of November, a few weeks before Warfare, with a complimentary theme to it. And you can find that on the Facebook group. And other than that, I'm sure the week after, I will no doubt be attempting to fit some games in as well, and as well as doing more shed investigation. So as one shed door opens and another shed door shuts, it's time to say goodbye this week. So goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
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 Yeah, there's quite a lot of background noise there. Is that somebody rattling something around?
Sounds like Andy in a galaxy far, far away.
This means war.
You don't want to hear about my game against Dave and versus
No.
Casino?
No.
Okay.
I want to go watch the telly.
This means war.
Let's see if we can get Zoom working for next time. God, I don't know what the hell went wrong with my computer.
Swordsman, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.